great talk earlier. I got it right, didn't I?
Yeah, you got it.
I got it right.
You got it.
Earlier, I asked her how to pronounce her maiden name, Weidman, and she said Weidman, and I came up and said Weidman the first time around, so it happens. Up next, we have Eric Ryan, another great talk earlier. Give it to Eric. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah. Eric, welcome to the couch, fellow Michigan native. And last but not least, from another excellent earlier talk, I like to call him JJ, Jason Johnson. Again, if you all have questions, feel free to jump up to the microphones up there for these folks. Ask anything that you want. We would love that. I want to start with a question that Eric and we had the opportunity to discuss this during the break. I'm working on a new column right now with Inc., and it's entitled, What's Not on Your Resume? And I'm talking to some top leaders across the country about those things that don't show up on their resume, that don't show up on their bio, but they still greatly influenced and informed who they are as leaders. And Eric, I'd like to start with you because, of course, you're known as the method guy, and you showed us this great work earlier. What you may not know about Eric is that Eric used to make pizzas for Little Caesars. I'm curious, tell us a little bit about that experience of making pizza and how maybe that informed who you are today in your work.
Yeah, well, whoa.
He loves
the voice
pizza.
Of God. So, I love pizza. I have a pizza fetish. And Little Caesars is kind of an iconic Detroit company. Mike Ilitch owns, two of the professional sports teams there. So when I was 16, I worked at a Little Caesars, and I think it's part of where I discovered the love we were talking about before of like the love of product and the love of experimentation. And my favorite thing to do is if I was working late hours there where there was no orders coming through, I would just make up stuff. So take crazy bread and mix it with different ingredients. And what was so cool is you put it in one side of the oven, it comes out the conveyor belt, something else, and it was always this fun experiment.
Right.
So I just always loved the idea of experimenting with product. And it's not on my resume, but maybe it should be.
I think it should be, and I think it can really inform a little bit about your work with Method as well, the experimentation that you've done. Jason, is there anything on your resume or that's not on your resume or bio that kind of informed you who you are today?
Well, yeah, there is something missing. So I started my career working for a giant computer distributor company, and I was in sales. No surprise, you might have heard me talk about that earlier. And I got involved in a new technology that was being developed, and ended up leaving this company to join this startup, and so off the resumes, missing on the resumes all the stuff I did before all my companies, and the cool story is I was at this company, and I walked by somebody's desk one night, and they had a little brochure, and it had a picture of a building. And it had a modem attached to this building. This is before there was broadband internet service. And I saw this diagram, and it was conceptual. And this company I worked for made these devices that would bring T1 service to buildings. But there was no modems, there was no DSL, there was no broadband. And I saw this diagram, and it inspired me to use that technology to build my first company. And I ended up quitting and becoming that company's biggest customer. And they went on to have $1 billion IPO. And I have to give credit to the people that actually gave me that idea by this little drawing I saw on somebody's desk one day that inspired me.
So what did you do? You saw a void? Where'd you get the courage all of a sudden to see this diagram and say, now let me flip the script a little bit and become a customer to you?
Well, I literally was laying in bed, and I was thinking about this night after night, that somebody someday is going to find a way to bring a T1 service to people's homes. And
it's a very common nighttime thought. Many times I've thought about that.
And this company had the technology for it, but they weren't using it in that way. They were actually using it to connect buildings, not to homes. And this is a long time ago. And I realized somebody's going to do this someday. And in fact, I talked to AT&T about it, and they were like, yeah, you want to come work for us and do that for us? And I said, no, I'm going to do it myself.
Rock and roll, okay. Laura, before Code 2040 had its genesis, tell us a little bit about some things that may be on your resume or your bio that the audience here may not be familiar with.
Well, I think what's interesting is obviously there's certain things that are appropriate for your resume, but they're not always the things that are most influential. So for me, it's really about kind of the people that I was exposed to and how they influenced the choices that I made. So my parents are both self-employed. My dad's a writer, my mom's a psychologist. And being exposed to them kind of charting their own path and then having peers, whether it was in college or graduate school, who also kind of struck out and either started companies or did things that are entrepreneurial were hugely influential to me, but there's really no place for that kind of on a resume.
Gotcha, okay. I'm curious, with your work, and early on, of course, you're here on the stage for a reason today because you've been successful in your work in many regards. How about in some of those earlier days, and you all shared a little bit about this, but Laura, can you think of a time early in Code 2040, and I know you're still a young organization, where you thought you were onto something, but you had to make a quick pivot to another direction?
I think we're in the middle of something like that now. I mean, our Fellows program has had terrific traction, but one of the things that we realized when we were going through the whole process of recruiting students and matching them with companies is that there's actually a lot of work to be done on the company side to get companies ready for students, and on the student side to get students ready for companies. And so it's really changed. If you'd asked me a year ago what expansion looked like for Code 2040, I would have said, well, then we're going to do the Fellows program in New York, and then we're going to do it in Omaha, or what have you. And now my answer is totally different. Now we're looking at rolling out new programming that kind of serves a different portion of the pipeline. And my hunch is that that's going to happen over and over again for us as we keep learning, as we keep iterating.
And when you find changes that hit you in the face like that, Eric and Jason, for you, what has made you open to pursuing those pivots and those changes? Of course, you start with a vision and you want to go this direction, but maybe the data's not lining up, but it's still where we can be stubborn, I'm sure. What has allowed you to be open to go that different direction? Is it the co-founder? Is it, again, maybe just dollars aren't going into the bank account?
I love how pivots become the new mulligan in business. Like if something's not working, we're just going to pivot. And I think, as an entrepreneur, you have to walk this dance. Externally, you have to be incredibly consistent and singular and unwavering about your vision. But internally, you've got to be incredibly flexible and opportunistic. Because if you're doing something like you are that's never been done before, you're going to learn stuff, and you got to take advantage of that learning. And walking that dance, I think, is sometimes the biggest challenge for an entrepreneur, of knowing how to play both sides of the house.
And have you found the dance enjoyable? During that time as an entrepreneur, is that something like, we're dancing, we're going to figure this out? Or you're like,
Totally. I mean, that's the fun, is you go out, you're super confident, like, yes, this is going to work. And then suddenly you're like, oh my God, I'm not sure. And I guess it's being bipolar. Right. I don't know if that's good.
Right. Well, Jason, I'm bipolar. Listen, you dream about T1s at night, right? Again, when you're dancing, when you are making that new mulligan, the pivot, is that something that gets you excited inside? Is there an anxiety that comes about? Is that you're excited you're about to go a different direction and solve a problem?
Well, I've talked about some of my successes. I think it's fair I talk about some of my failures too. So around 2001, I'd come across some voice over IP technology, and I hadn't joined Dolby yet, and this is when I was trying to figure out, should I be an entrepreneur or should I go be an intrapreneur? And I came across this voice over IP technology, and I built some software that would do voice over IP on. Remember PDAs? Remember Palm Pilots? And there was the Windows CE version, like the compact PDA. So I made software for those two platforms, so you could hold your PDA to your head, and you could talk into your computer, and convinced Kara Swisher and Walt Mossberg to let us show it on stage with Palm at the very first All Things Digital. I presented the very first one and the very last one. I don't know what that says. So anyway, so hey, we were on stage. We got a bunch of media coverage. Complete and utter failure. People did not want to hold a PDA to their head. In fact, the compact one, the Windows CE one, you had to hold it upside down because the microphone was on the other side. It just looked odd to do a voice over IP call. This is before Skype. and we quit. We gave up. We couldn't raise money for it. We didn't quit. We quit, and then of course a couple years later, Skype was born, and you know what happened with them.
A couple years too early, huh?
Yeah, a couple years too early, and probably quit a little too early.
Now people are holding phones up to their head. They're like 13 by 13 inches. It's ridiculous, right? You seen those new phones? It's like, yeah,
The phablets, yeah.
That's another subject for another day. Eric, you talked a lot about company culture today, and those videos were phenomenal. And I only can imagine what a day in their life is like at your organization. You know, you talk about keeping it weird. I think Tony Hsieh at Zappos had said something similar. For those people who are growing, and of course you start with 4 to 6 people, sometimes maybe just 1, and then you go to the 8, 15, 20, and you get that boom. Laura, I know your organization is growing. Where's one of those early places to start with company culture, Eric?
Yeah, I was talking about this with somebody earlier here, and when you're trying to get a business off the ground, you're just in survival mode. So it almost seems indulgent to waste space talking about culture because you're just trying to figure out if you're going to make payroll next week. But yet it's arguably the most important thing for your long-term success. So I think the most important place it starts is just who you're hiring. And it's so easy also to get caught up on hiring people purely on skill set. And let's face it, when you're starting a company, you're also kind of amazed people are willing to quit their job and come join you. So you don't get overly picky. And it is so important to hire for both culture fit, even if you don't have that culture totally defined, but at least you're hiring for the right type of person that you want to define your culture. And if you do that and you get the right people on board, the culture will naturally evolve in a direction that is going to be positive.
Right. And Laura, as you're building your organization, how are you finding the right people? Are you making sure you don't get stuck in a silo, picking the same type of person? Are you working with your advisors to ensure you're getting the right people in those positions?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I could not agree more with that assessment. I mean, culture is what happens when you're not around. So when I'm, out on the road here, I can trust that my team is executing to a T and doing it with the ethos that I hope that they will, because our culture is so firmly in place. So nothing is more important even early on. And I think, it's important. And it's important also to cast a really wide net and leverage your advisors, your networks, social media, job postings. We want people both through our network, but also who we never would have otherwise connected with. And then we use, that kind of culture and ethos to make sure that they'll fit what we want to grow the business into.
Culture is critical, right? Culture is key, and it starts from the top down, right? So we spend more time in our weeks with our coworkers than we do our families and our best friends. So you got to like each other. You got to want to be around each other. And at August, my current company, we spend a lot of time trying to have fun. And it starts at the top. So you can see these or not, but I wear wacky socks. This is my Batman socks today. I have all kinds of crazy socks. And we try to have fun and be lighthearted in the office. I also try to be very transparent as a CEO, right? My team, they know what I'm thinking. I don't hold back. I tell them, any meeting that I'm in, unless it's a board meeting, you're welcome to attend. Anybody can come to any meeting. Everything is transparent. Everything is shared. You can access emails. You can access files. Everything. That's the culture that I want to create. We are a community together, spending 50, 60 hours a week together. Let's be open. Let's be transparent. Let's have fun. Let's be a community.
I think a little simple way we think about it is every new hire, and you could do this at the earliest stage, is like when you meet that person, go, would I want to sit next to them on a 5-hour flight? Or would I be okay to be on the same plane with them but not sit next to them? Or do I want to take a separate flight? Right. And if it's not somebody you're psyched to sit next to you for 5 hours, then do not hire them.
Well, how about those? First, let me point out something. The sock game on stage is ridiculous today, right? I'm sorry, Laura, you didn't join in with us, but the sock game on stage is on point. Hope you can zoom in on that. These are important things we talk about at Big Omaha, the sock game. Okay, do you want to sit next to this coworker, this colleague, this co-founder on a flight for 5 hours, Eric, Laura, Jason? But let's talk about friction and collaboration. Now, sometimes we know that pressure creates good things, right? You can start a fire with knocking 2 stones together. You can get some kindling and 2 pieces of wood, and you can even think diamonds were formed under pressure. So in terms of, I want to have a beer with this guy or woman, how much do you need those individuals around you a little bit who may push your buttons a little bit, who may push back sometimes to the CEO or founder that you don't expect it, but they create that friction where good outcomes come?
Yeah. I mean, that's where you go back to culture, right? So the values are how you're going to treat each other. And if you have an organization with great values, and then you populate it with very diverse points of view, and going back to the idea of artist and operator, exactly. Like you want to hire people who are the opposite of you, and populate the company that way. So there is tension. You want to build tension in the system, but then make it healthy tension where everybody understands how we treat each other in a collaborative way.
All right. Jason, you and tension, you get along with colleagues that will push back a little bit on the CEO?
You know, I think it's critical that every employee, especially in a startup, feels that they can challenge everybody, including me, right? And I.
You mean that?
I mean it, and I make sure they do it. Like so we do a stand-up. If you're not familiar with the whole agile methodology, so every morning we have a stand-up meeting. We stand in a circle. There's about 20 of us now at August, and we talk about very quickly what are the priorities. Is there any blockers that are preventing you from doing your job? And I make sure people call me out, and I ask them. I'm like, am I helping you get past that block that's preventing you from being productive? And call me out. Also, we use task management. We use this tool called Asana, and I encourage my entire team, assign things to me, and call me out if I'm missing deadlines. Yeah. Don't hold back.
When they call you out at that stand-up meeting, do you pull out like a moleskin from your back pocket and put them on the list? You just nod at them like, okay, thank you for calling me out. Check out your bonus. Again, if we have any questions, please jump up to the mics and just wave at me. The lights are pretty bright here, so I may not be able to see you, but they would love to take your questions. Before we depart from the subject matter of culture, you worked for Dolby for a long time. You worked within an organization. A lot of people here work within organizations. How can someone, affect the culture when it's kind of already been predetermined? You didn't let what was already in place stop you from doing what you did. So how can you effectively navigate an existing corporate culture?
Yeah, so it took a lot of managing up, if you've heard that term, right? So there was this existing executive team at Dolby, and I very targetedly, I spent time with each of them. I mean, I would get on their calendar, I would get to know their EA, very important. I'd get to know the EA and
their executive assistant.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, can I get on Ed or Ramsey? Can I get on their calendar for lunch in the next week or two? And I would get time, and I would spend time with them, and I'd build that relationship. I spent time listening to what they were trying to accomplish, and what their exact needs were, what they were trying to do, and then I'd slide in, well, I have this project, I have this thing that I want to do, and see if it would, if I could get it to become their idea. And, it takes time, it takes a lot of work.
I'm guessing you would go in with as much of that project complete as possible, not just an idea. Those are easy to shoot down.
I mean, you're sitting down with a senior executive for a global publicly traded company. Their time is very valuable. And so when they ask you questions, they ask you for numbers, they ask you for have you done any market research? Yeah, you have to have an answer. You have to look like you spent time and you respect their time and you have those answers. Or if you don't, you're quick to say, I don't have an answer to that. Let me get back to you.
Sure.
Move on.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, changing culture is brutal, right? Like, culture is human behavior. You can send an email and change process like that. And if a culture is really good, it tends to stay good. And if it's really bad, it tends to stay bad. And trying to change that, I think the easiest way to do it is cultures are contagious. And I always find, too, if somebody does something really inspiring in a culture, it gets copied pretty quickly. And so one of the easiest ways to start changing a culture are just like those little tipping points by doing something that role models hopefully better change.
Great. Let's think of a question. I can't see if someone's over there or not, but we'll start over here.
I think there is.
Check.
You about to freestyle?
Test.
Landon Young here. A lot of startup companies are comprised of friends and family. Can you speak to the nature of that intimate culture when a problem arises and someone has to go?
To repeat the question, you said a lot of startup cultures are found with friends and family, and speak to that experience?
In that sort of intimate environment, almost a family-like culture that can happen, can you speak to that moment where it's, someone has to go for the sake of the company, someone who might be a friend or family member?
Well, one way to look at this, as sad as this statistic is, 50% of marriages fail, right? And this is somebody that you're sharing, your life with, you're maybe having children with, and yet 50% of those fail. It's a terrible statistic, but it's true. If you're not seeing if you're not seeing failure in relationships in your company, if in other words, you shouldn't be if marriage success rate is 50%, you shouldn't be surprised if employment success in your culture is not, I want to say that we fire 50% of people at August, but
You can't even have makeup sex. It's like, the odds are against you. Is that where you're going with that?
that's exactly what I was going to say.
So have makeup sex.
He's blushing over
Please
there.
do not tweet that.
Yeah, this is live stream, so.
Where's the live on?
Well, no, you hear that and you think about your people ask the question, should I hire a family member? Should I hire a friend? And people say yes if you're okay firing a family member or firing a friend. I mean, have you experienced working with friends or family members, Laura?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be a relationship that you're willing to lose, I think. A previous venture started with a very good friend, and we went through a very tough time, and we came out of it. We're actually still very close, but there certainly was a period of time where it was a bit touch and go, and I think that is very common, and I think you really have to be prepared for that. A piece of advice that I heard someone give was that before you start a company with somebody, you should lock yourselves in a room for 48 hours without leaving. And if at the end of that time, working on your venture for 48 hours straight, you still want to start a company with them, then you should go for it. A little bit extreme, but I think that's the mentality you have to go in it with, is like, this is really intense. It does not always go well, and you have to be ready for that with that other person.
Great advice.
Another question over here, I believe.
Hey guys, I'm Nate Allen from a company called Proof. First of all, thanks to all of you for coming. You guys all gave great talks. Eric, I want to read you an email from 4 years ago that I wrote after coming home from the bars.
Hold on, say that again. You wrote what?
I wrote an email after I had been drinking a little bit. This is an actual true email. I'm not joking. To info@methodhome.com. I fell in love with your bar soap. The lather is the perfect consistency, and the soap lasts much longer than your competitors. The olive leaf type was great, and the white tea bar was divine. I can no longer find this product in store or online. What has happened to your bar soap? Now, it sounds like you and your co-founder have some stockpiles in your basement.
I just might be able to hook you up with some.
Yeah. Give him another round of applause for that.
That was awesome.
Courage.
Let me give him. Awesome. Find me afterwards.
That's one of those ones you don't know where it's going to go. I saw Eric lean back like, well.
Especially when you can't see in the lights.
Yeah. All right. You don't want to get shot at Big Omaha. Wow. How do you transition from that? One last question as we get ready to. That's a heck of a moment. I like that. The smile on my face is not manufactured. Last question for all of you. Generic question, but I still think it's a fun one. If you weren't doing what you're doing right now, Laura, and all you guys will get the same question is, what would you be doing right now? What do you think you'd be pursuing?
I have like 10 other startup ideas, so probably one of those.
All right. You'd still be in the tech space pursuing something there.
Yeah.
Nothing radically different. You wouldn't move to Utah or anything?
I mean, it could be fun to like have a bar in like Hawaii or something, but I'd probably realistically be doing another one of my startup ideas.
Jason, you're doing something totally different. What would it be? What would you be pursuing right now?
You know, I love using my hands. I mean, I love building things. I love using power tools and using wood, and I would love to build my own house.
Wow.
A friend of mine, Kevin Kelly, the founding editor of Wired magazine, he said that everybody at least once should build their own house.
God. Does it build a house, lose a spouse?
So I would love to build a house someday by hand. That'd be a lot of fun.
Eric, would you go back to your roots making pizza at Little Caesars? What would you be doing today, man?
I think the Chipotle pizza is interesting, but I want to open a hotel, like a really weird hotel.
That'd be fun.
Like, whenever you ever stayed in a hotel, you're like, that's weird. Like,
I have. We'll talk about it. Yeah.
come to our weird hotel.
Yeah.
It's opening 2016. Napa?
Yeah, perfect.
That'd be great.
That's what.
Can you
done.
fund it?
I'm in.
All right.
I will be a guest. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Laura, Eric, and Jason. Thank you, guys.